Hi, welcome to Lesson 4, Blueprint Reading, Part 2. Now, if we recall, last time in Lesson 1, we looked at what blueprint reading and drafting is. What kind of language are we looking at? It was a graphic language. And we also looked at line types. And we wrapped things up by looking at projections. If we recall, well, we talked about first and third angle projection. And we mentioned that in North America, my world here, well, everything is done in third angle projection. And that's how the rest of this course is going to go down. So if you're in a part of the world that uses first angle projection, well, you'll have to adjust accordingly. So what are we going to be looking at today? Well, we're going to start by looking at views. And more importantly, right off the bat, is going to be how to determine what surface of the part that we're trying to sketch should be the front view. How to determine the front view that's going to be on the drawing. Now, once we know which view is going to be the front view, we're going to be looking at how many views are required to represent a part and how they should be positioned on the drawing. Once we have a good idea of what our 6 basic views are, well, we're going to be talking about proper terminology. And we're going to define with precision what width, height, and depth actually are, so that when we discuss between tradesmen, that we all agree on what we're talking about, and that way we can all understand each other. Then we'll probably be looking at special projections, or more often than not what we also call angular projections, that create views from views that aren't in our normal 6-view layout. We're also, after that, going to be looking at types of drawings: detailed, assembly, combination, and we'll probably end up by talking about notes and headers, and that'll probably be everything that we'll get into today's video. So let's get right to it and start by looking at how to define or determine what surface of the part should be the front view. Now, you may be wondering, why is it so important to know which of the surfaces of the part is going to be represented as the front view? Well, it is actually quite important. And it's important for at least 2 reasons. The first reason is that what we're looking at here for blueprint reading, well, can also be applied to sketching. Now, we're not talking about becoming draftsmen or draftspeople if we want to be modern, but we're talking about sketching. Now, when we sketch, projections and views are things that do apply. Now, a sketch is a freehand drawing, but that doesn't mean that it can be all willy-nilly. So it's important to determine the front view, because obviously that affects all the other views in the drawing. And it's also important to determine which of the surfaces should be the front view, because it's from that front view that we are going to define the terms width, height, and depth. And obviously, if we're not talking about the same front view, well, we can't determine those width, height, and depth expressions. So how do we define the front view on a part? Well, it's a little simpler than you could imagine. The front view is the view of the drawing that best represents the overall shape of the part and that shows the most details while including the least amount of hidden lines. Now, if we smooth all that together, that means that if I took all the other views out of a drawing, the front view would be the one that shows us what the part looks like most. Now, if we have a 1, 2, 3 block like this one, well, it wouldn't be this view that we choose as a front view. It wouldn't be this one either. It gives us an idea or an impression of how rectangular the part is, but it's not representative. Now, I could use this one, but On the back side here, I note that the two main holes in this primary surface, well, are counterbore. And that makes that this view is the one for me and for most people that most represents what a 1, 2, 3 block looks like. And since I've chosen to position it so that I can see head on the counterbores, well, that eliminates a bunch of hidden lines. So in this case, this would be the front view. Now, if we look at this part from this angle, well, we see that it looks like a rectangle but almost square part, but it's quite undescript. If I look at it from this point of view, again, it's difficult to really define what it is. I'm starting to get some good clues though with the line down the center and all that, but really if I turn it and orient it this way, well, everyone should recognize a V-block. And that's because this surface is really representative of the shape of this part. This cries out V-block, and that is my front view. And let's say that we have a part that has very little going on in it. This is just a 6 by 1 by 3/8 bar of steel. No holes, no nothing. Well, it's still going to have a front view. So let's take a look. If I look at it from here, it doesn't really give that impression. If I look at it from here, I don't think this really represents the part. However, if I look at it here, this here gives me an idea of the part. I see the 6, I see the 1, I get that proportion, that ratio. All I can't see here is the depth. So this would be, in this case, the front view. Let's take a few seconds and go take a look at some actual drawings and define which of the views that we're looking at is the front view. Now obviously when the drawing is already drawn, it's a lot easier to figure out.
Now, a drawing has to have a front view. So if it's a single view drawing, well, the single view is de facto the front view. And in this case, my drill point gauge drawing, well, this is the front view. Why this is a single view drawing, well, that's a whole other can of beans, and we'll be looking at that in a few minutes. Here we have a two-view drawing of a part that's a little more complex. It's a bench block. If I look at this view, well, I can see that the part is generally cylindrical in shape. I can see that it has several round holes, holes that I see as circles, and that means that I'm really seeing the true geometry. And I can even see with hidden lines that somewhere underneath there's a hex. Now, this is a good representation of what a bench block looks like. If I look at the second view here, well, this view doesn't describe very much. It doesn't really give me a feeling for the shape of the part. So in this case, again, it's quite clear that this is my front view. And if this is my front view, well, this second view down here has to be my bottom view. Because as I said earlier, we're working in third angle projection. Now, here's a three-view drawing of a part that isn't more complex than the last one we've seen, but that requires three views instead of two to show all of its details properly. In this case, it's quite clear that this is the front view. It describes the part a lot better than the two other views. Now, if this is the front view, well, that makes this the right side view. And that makes this the bottom view. Now, this bottom view isn't just the bottom view. It's also a section view. Now, in order to clarify what I was saying about the bottom view in that last drawing, let's take a look at this two-view drawing of an alignment bar. Now, in this drawing, we have a front view that really represents the shape of this alignment bar. And we have a right-hand view that helps us to understand certain particularities. But that protected center is quite small, so we've added this detailed view in order to amplify those small details and permit us to show them properly. But be careful, this is not a bottom view because it's not part of the projection. Now, it doesn't align with the rest of the drawing, and it's not at the same scale as the rest of the drawing. So it's a detailed view, yes. It's a section view, yes, but it is not a bottom view because it's not part of the projection.
So before we go any further, we're going to try and get rid of some confusion, especially with terminology. And as previously mentioned, the spoken and written words aren't good ways of describing physical things. And as an example, well, we'll use my little bar here. It's difficult to describe this bar just talking about it. But it gets even more confusing if we don't know what we're talking about. How is the part oriented? And that's where our width, height, and depth comes into play. So, my part here, my front view, this is my little 6 by 1 by 3/8 bar, and I have a little sketch here of it, so I'll dispense with the bar. And we can see that in blue here, I have my front view. On top, because we're third angle projection, I have my top view, and to the side here I have my side view, and seen as it's on the right, well, it's the right side view. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but when we're talking about the bar or the part, and I say to somebody, well, the part is 6 inches wide. How do I know? Well, I measured it, yeah, but from what? From the front view. So width, height, and depth. I always describe these terms thinking of looking head-on at the front view. This is the width of the part, this is the height of the part, and this is the depth of the part. Now if I look at the top view, I can see the width and the depth. If I look at the side view, I can see the height and the depth. And again, if I look at the front view, I can see the width and the height, and the depth is in that direction. Now, if we all know how we're orienting the part to talk about it, well, we can all make sense. And that's the way to make sense. So, here's a little sketch of our basic views in a normal projection. These are the basic views. So we have our front view. Let's say this is a 1, 2, 3 block. It's about the proportions that I have on my sketch here. Front view, top, bottom view, right side view, left side view, and back view. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 normal views in a normal projection. But we rarely have 6 views on a drawing. And the question that we need to ask ourselves is, how many views are required? Now that question is a little easier to answer than you might think. Because the answer is just this. You need the least amount possible of views to show the part in its entirety. If you can see all the required details with just a single view drawing, well, you do only a single view drawing. If 2 are required, you use 2, and so on and so forth. But what you must never do is put superfluous information on a drawing. If a side view is not required, don't use one. All it will do is confuse the reader. So let's go take a look at some drawings that use single view projections, 2 view projections, and 3 view projections.
Now, here we have our famous or infamous drill point gauge drawing. Now, this is a single view drawing, and it is a single view projection because there's no need to have a side, a top, or a bottom view. And that's because it's a bidimensional part. Bidimensional means that its dimensions change only in 2 of the 3 axes. And in this case, the width changes and the height changes, but the depth remains constant throughout the part. Now, since the depth doesn't change, and since we know that our top, bottom, and side views show as only difference the depth, because the width and the height are seen in the front view, well, there's no need for a top, bottom, or side view here, because the depth never changes. So, in this case, a single view projection is really all that's required. Setting any more views up would only confuse things. We have to, however, be careful. As you look at the print, you'll see that there's a detail A view, and that is not part of the projection. It's not at the same scale, and it doesn't line up with the part. So it's just there to give us some room to put the dimensions on that scale. Here we have a multiple part drawing composed of 4 different parts that, once assembled, produce an edge finder. Parts 1, 4, and 5 are single view drawings, so they're like 3 separate drawings on the same print. And they're single view drawings because they're cylindrical in shape. And if you note, all the height dimensions on parts 1, 4, and 5 are indicated as being diameters. Now, since I know that they're round, I never need to look at a view showing me the depth of those parts. It's constantly round. So a single view for each part is all that's required. However, if we look at part 2, well, there's 2 flats milled on this part, and that creates a difference in depth. So we're going to want to have a side, top, or bottom view on this one. And in this case, well, I've chosen to show the face view or the front view and the top view. This lets us see the thickness of the tab and gives us some room for dimensioning. Here we have a 2-view drawing of a tapered arbor, and this is an MT3 to J33, a tapered arbor, and it's pretty standard stuff. And since all the taper dimensions are standard and can be found in the Machinery's Handbook, well, there's not many dimensions to be put on this drawing. However, the flattened tang does give us a bit of a headache, and that's why we need 2 views in this drawing, just to clarify that tang, because all the rest of the part is cylindrical in shape, so all bidimensional except for that tang. Here we have a 3-view projection of a 1, 2, 3 block. And we have 3 views here for clarity, not so much because we absolutely need them. In reality, all I need here is the front and the bottom view. But if I used only the front and bottom view here, it would have made for a very dense and a very busy drawing, and it would have been difficult to decipher. So in this case, I add the right view to give me some room for dimensioning and to make everything really crystal clear.
So we have an idea of what our lines mean, we have an idea of what projections are, and we know our views. Now would be a good time to start looking at things that surround our drawing itself. So let's go take a look at notes and headers.
Here we have a drawing of an alignment bar for lining up the centers on a lathe. Now, it's a 2-view drawing, even if the part is mostly cylindrical, or it is almost all cylindrical in shape. But since there's a little flat on one end, well, we're going to require a right end view here to clear things up with that flat. We also have a section AA view, that's a section view really, and it's not part of the projection. But that's not all that's going on this drawing. We also have notes, and on this drawing we have 3 notes. Stamp identification on flat, number 1, 2 hardened and tempered 46 to 52 Rockwell, and 3 grind all surfaces indicated by this symbol. Now, notes are important and must be read. They aren't part of the dimensioning of the drawing, and they aren't part of the drawing itself. So things that need to be indicated to the reader that aren't part of the drawing, well, appears as notes. But it's important to keep the notes to a minimum. This is not a text, it's a drawing. We also have on this drawing a bill of materials. And if we look down here, we can see that we have an item number, we have a part name, we have a quantity required. It's important to know how many of these parts are required. We have a description, that is the rough dimensions of the part required to make this part. And finally, we have the type of material required for the project. Right under the bill of materials, well, we have the cartouche or the header itself. Now, the header is very important because it's in this header that we're going to find out things like tolerance and all the other information that we might need to be able to file the drawing properly and to be able to find it at a later date.
Now, you may have noticed as we've been looking at our example drawings that there's different types of drawings. And it's important to note that there are several types of drawings. But we're going to simplify here and we're going to say that basically there's three different types. We have assembly drawings, we have detailed drawings, and we have combination assembly and detail.
Here we have the assembly drawing for our hammer project. Now, we need an assembly drawing in this case because there's several parts, and one of the principal roles of an assembly drawing is to show how the different parts of a project fit together. Each part of the project is identified by a balloon and an item number that brings us back to our bill of materials. The dimensions, if any, that appear on an assembly drawing are overall dimensions and shouldn't be used in the manufacturing of the different parts. That's because an assembly drawing shows how all the parts are assembled, and each one could have different tolerances, so adding up their major dimensions doesn't necessarily give the proper overall dimensions. So these dimensions are there just to give an impression of the overall size of the part once it's assembled. Assembly drawings are useless if you don't have a detailed drawing or several detailed drawings to go with them. Here we have our hammer project detailed drawing. Now, we have only one detailed drawing because this project is quite simple. And it's possible to combine all four drawings of the separate parts of the project on the one detailed drawing. It's important to note that this drawing contains all the dimensional and detailed information required to manufacture these parts completely, and that's why it's called a detailed drawing. The only thing that's not on this detailed drawing is the bill of materials, and that's because it was included in the assembly drawing. Here's an assembly drawing of a slightly more complex project. It's a small punch and die set for producing 1/4-inch washers. The assembly drawing here is done in an isometric projection, and I've included 2 of the 8 detailed drawings just as examples of detailed drawings that contain only one part. As you can see, I haven't yet had time to translate these plans. Eventually, all the plans will be translated and will be freely available on my website, thatlazymachinist.com. Some projects are simple enough to be able to combine both detailed and assembly drawings on the same drawing. That's the case for this Edge Finder project. Now, when that's the case, we call these drawings combined detail and assembly drawings. And finally, when the project is a one-part project, well, we include the bill of materials on the detailed drawing and just leave it at that.
Well, there we are at the end of this part 2 of our blueprint reading video. In our part 3, well, we're going to be looking at some special views, offset sections and stuff like that. We're going to be looking at drawing layout, and obviously we're going to be looking at dimensioning. That's a big subject. But before we end this video, I would like to say a great big thank you. Thank you because today is Christmas, and I received a very special present or a very special gift, I should say, early this morning. Because in the wee hours of this 25th of December 2014, I got my 1 millionth view. 1 million views. It's hard for me to wrap my head around that one. It's such a large number. But what impresses me even more is the interest that I feel out there from thousands upon thousands of people who want to learn about this trade. And that gives me a lot of confidence in the future. And not only that, but the fact that there are many, many people out there doing in their way what I'm trying to do here, and doing a damn good job of it. I'm talking about Tom Lipton and Keith Fenner and Double Boost and Colin down at Comp Edge X and so many more, A-Bomb, and I could go on and on and on. It's great, and it's a good feeling to know that we're part about that. Oh, I can't forget Tom's Techniques either, which is just a great site. It's great to feel that I'm part of all that, and to have received that gift of 1 million views on Christmas Day. Well, it's just all the more special. So today, the 25th of December 2014. Now, I have an English site and I have a French site, and that million combines both together. So this thank you goes out around the world, from Greenland to the Bermudas, down to Australia and New Zealand, Japan, the Middle East, everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. I have people who pay attention and that like what I'm doing, and that humbles me, and that makes me very happy. So a big thank you to all of you, regardless of your personal beliefs. I think that I can wish you a happy, happy holiday season with a lot of joy and a lot of love. So thanks everyone, and happy machining.